viewers, welcome to RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka BlenderHD, BlenderHD. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Monday, November 27th, and you know what we do every Monday. We bring in James McCool. Mondays with McCool, the co-author, with me on the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, 15-hour audio DFS masterclass. You could pick up at theoryofdfs.com. Getting over the Thanksgiving holidays, we had the Thanksgiving slate that I didn't play, and then we had the 10-game slate yesterday that we are going to review. Hit that thumbs up button, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell to always know when we go live. James, I did fine on FanDuel, kind of broke even on DraftKings. Yesterday, I mean, you were tweeting it out. It's like, if a player's owned, they probably do well.
It's been a brutal year, man. Contrarian players are just getting kicked in the teeth.
It wasn't a super shot. You have to admit, it wasn't like last week where, if you just played like the optimal lineup, you came in like top 1% in tournaments. But
no, but
really outside. To be fair, I just want to say, outside of Kyron Williams, like I'm bringing up results DB here. There were a lot of paths to get to like top scores. Like it wasn't like we had ownership wise. I'm looking at the $20 milli. Like Tank Dell put up 17 points. I mean, it's not like you needed that. I mean, he didn't bomb or anything. Trey McBride put up 13, right? Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, Michael Pittman, in the 20s, Jonathan Taylor in the 20s. Like, it wasn't those types of weeks. Rashad White, Christian Kirk. Like, there weren't that many flame emojis in contests. But for the most part, I mean, you got a decent amount of points out of people that projected well from a mean perspective and were decently owned.
Yeah. It's just been like this week. No, you did not need the cash lineup, right? That wasn't. But as soon as Justin Watson scores a touchdown at 20% owned, it's like just tilt to another level. And I had a Patrick Mahomes stack with Justin Watson, but like, the other pieces just weren't there. It was just, it just feels like the last couple weeks have just been like, oh, well, here's the top 20 players in ownership. Take your pick and prepare your winnings, and it hasn't been a bank, right? Like it's last week, it was legit. If you just played all the highest owned players, you just like won a bunch of money. But over the last couple of weeks, 4 or 5 weeks or so, if you just played the top highest owned players, you're probably in contention for a min cash. Like at least, you're placing 20 to 30th percentile or so. And that's kind of brutal.
But James, that highlights. People think of that as bad. And I don't think of it that way. Think of it more in terms of there's a reason why players are higher owned. It's because they do project better, because they, based on their price, based on the salary dynamics and the position distribution of the slate, makes it so that those players get there more often, and they should be higher owned. Your job is to make combinations of those players, a mix of those players that is still different enough from the field that you gain relative value from.
Right.
So the chalk hitting to whatever extent we're not failing is not a bad thing.
Right. It's
a bad thing if you approach a slate. And we've talked about this in the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, right? We constantly have these conversations about, good chalk and bad chalk type of things. Like it's about overowned and underowned. And if you're building lineups, like if you're playing, I'm not even talking about the milli. If you're playing the spy, the red zone, if you open up your lineup after lock and you see like your highest owned player is 12%, that probably means you did something wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, it really comes down to, can you have certain players that are lower owned? Sure.
Mhm.
But you can't just go in going, okay, I'm not going to play Tank Dell. I'm not going to play Trey McBride. I'm not going to play Henry or Pacheco. I'm not going to play Michael Pittman. I'm not going to, like, once you start doing this, your projection starts going down so significantly that you're putting yourself like way behind in relative value to try to make that up, unless it's a slate where so much wacky stuff happens that, like, my best team in GPP this week was a team that had Isaiah Pacheco,
Mhm.
Trey McBride,
Mhm.
Tank Dell,
Yep.
Michael Pittman,
Yep.
right? You know how I got different? I played Derek Carr plus Chris Olave plus Juwan Johnson,
Yep.
right? I played the Patriots defense in that lineup, right? So, like, Derek Carr, this was in the $100. This was my $100 spy lineup, my 100K spy, my main lineup. Derek Carr was 1% owned, Olave was 4% owned, and Juwan Johnson was 1% owned.
Yep.
Like, if Olave doesn't get concussed and actually hits 40 points, Derek Carr gets there also. And
Yep.
they're both like so low owned in combination. Why wouldn't I jam in just whatever the better projected plays? I was higher on Kyren Williams than guys like Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry. So I made a conscious effort, even though Kyren Williams for his price projected 1 or 2 points lower. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get different with the stack with Kyren Williams and then just give me the highest projected lineup from that point forward, and I'm good. And if you run the sims, and we have sim labs here at RotoGrinders, which you could try for free, rotogrinders.com/simlabs, especially for tonight's showdown slate in NFL, Bears Vikings. The more and more you run sim labs just for lineups, like, let me see what a Derek Carr Olave lineup looks like. Let me see a Juwan Johnson lineup looks like. You'll see these constructions. You'll see that the highest rated simulated, when we simulate the contests out, are, oh, you're playing someone that's like 2% owned that has, that's 20 times less owned than this other wide receiver. It's like, well, yeah, just pair him with Derek Carr and then just play the chalk around it.
Yeah.
And for that smaller to mid-sized contest, like that's it. So, like, when the chalk hits, I'm not upset. Even as a contrarian player, it's those weeks like last week, James, where all of it hits. Like, because the point is that, let's say there are a handful of 6 to 8 players that are very high owned.
Mhm.
The perfect scenario is I want 4 of them to do well. Right? I don't care which 4 they are. I have all 8 of them, but I just want 4 of them to do well, because then I have the 4v4s of the combinations of the 4 that possibly did well. It's when all 8 do well, it's like, well, I was never going to make a lineup with an ownership sum of 220. So like God bless you. Feel free. That's those weeks I'm not going to win. But I see people constantly building lineups that have ownership sums of 60, of 50. And I go, like, dude, you're playing a Browning, Chase, Irv Smith lineup. It's like, dude, you can play the chalk defense. You can play Isaiah Pacheco in that lineup. You can play Michael Pittman in that. You can do whatever you want. Like, at any time, the fact that you're losing projection, you're not gaining anything. Because what ends up happening is that if you win with that low ownership sum lineup, you win the contest by like 40 points, and you're getting extra relative value that you didn't even need. Like, just do exactly what you need to get to first place. Anything past that. And that's why I'm focusing on like the small to mid-size contests, like the 1,000 to 5,000 entry contest, because once we start talking about the million, 100,000, 200,000 entries, then the case for making lower ownership sum lineups gets a little bit better and better. Right. But we see that you don't even need that, really. But I just want to make it around the stuff that we kind of focus on, like the spies and the power sweeps and stuff that people galaxy brain themselves off of, Like, dude, yeah, if this hits, yeah, you're right, you do win, but you probably would have won with the chalk piece in there also. Like, you're not gaining as much as you think. So, what was your approach in GPPs this week? And then we'll start talking about some surprises in ownership, because I think I was off on a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, everybody was. Yeah, I agreed that the chalk was good. On my Saturday stream, I had mentioned going over what the projected chalk was. A lot of it made sense. The only pieces that didn't were really George Pickens, who I thought was looking like really bad chalk on Saturday. He ended up not being popular, I think, at all. But he was projecting for 15% owned or something on Saturday. And so with that, he looked like really bad chalk. He ended up coming in under that. That was great. And then I thought that Trey McBride was projecting way too high for his price. He's not underpriced anymore. He was priced appropriately, 4,700. You're not getting a really big value discount on him. And I thought that he was too highly owned to be played outside of an Arizona stack. So I thought the chalk was good overall. I did not expect Kyren Williams to be 18% owned, but that shifted a lot of different things. Overall, I went with a Buffalo stack, a Kansas City stack, and an Arizona stack. I did use Trey McBride in the Arizona stack. Brought it back with Puka Nacua, who, the Rams put up 37 real-life points. Puka Nacua probably did really, really well. He didn't do really well.
What does it say, James? Where if you saw the stat line for the Rams game and you saw Stafford threw for almost 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and you go,
one of Puka or Cooper gets there.
Right. And you look at the scores and you're like, Justin Watson on 1 target and 1 catch outscored both Kupp and Puka Nacua.
Tilt. Giga tilt, dude. So overall, I was on a lot of the high on pieces. And this is where my tilt comes from right now, because I'm just on the coldest of cold streaks that could possibly happen, right? I'm just bleeding money in anything that I do right now. I was my lineup for my let's see. Here's my Arizona stack. So in my Arizona stack, I had Derrick Henry, I had Greg Dortch, who for whatever reason was 15% owned. I had Trey McBride at 36% owned. I had Rashid Shaheed. And then I had
I had a bunch of Shaheed also, and he got obviously I had a bunch. The Saints were my highest owned. I had a bunch of Olave, Shaheed. I had a bunch of the Saints, and then I'm watching Red Zone and looking on Twitter, and it seemed like every half an hour, someone from the Saints game, everyone in my lineup is getting injured. It's just Olave's headed to the medical tent. Shaheed is doubtful. Jawan Johnson was injured for a couple of plays, and I'm like, who the hell is catching the ball? What the hell is going on? And then just feeding Kamara at that point.
Yeah. So I was on a lot of the higher owned pieces. I mix and matched quite a few different other higher owned pieces. I was on Buffalo, which was a pretty chalky spot to be on.
Yeah. Did you think? No. Did you think Diggs was going to be 18% owned? Diggs was twice as owned as AJ Brown.
Yeah, that was silly. I thought that people were going to be on the Philadelphia side, but okay, yeah, I had Diggs projected at 9% owned. He came in twice as high owned as I thought he would. So
Khalil Shakir came in at Khalil Shakir was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 7th highest owned wide receiver.
Yeah. Well, when I was doing my content, when I on the video, I didn't really put much thought into it. But after I started writing for my morning Sunday article, the price discrepancy between stacking the main Philadelphia stack and stacking with Buffalo just made it so hard to stack Philadelphia. And I should have considered that more. I did like the Buffalo side overall. I had Buffalo projected higher than Philadelphia by a point or something like that for their main stack. So with the price drop and everything like that, I should have considered that a little bit more. But I like the Buffalo side more anyway. I was never really going to go with AJ Brown anyway, but if I had known that AJ Brown was going to be 10% owned and Diggs was going to be 19% owned, I probably would have considered AJ Brown more.
In the chat, Michael Dompier asks, has any idea of people using Sims more put them on the Diggs type of players? For those that do, yes. I think when you're looking at the Millie with 177,000 entries, the amount of people that are doing that type of process is minimal in comparison. I think it's more due to the fact that was clearly, like, just from an implied point total, like that was the game of the week. And when typically casual players are like, what's the highest total game? How do I play it? And it's to play the Hurts side is just you plug in Hurts and you go, what do I, Brown, Smith, and I have no salary left, right? Like, and that, no one's going to play Jack Stoll. No one's going to take a shot on Zacchaeus or Julio Jones.
It was $25K to stack Philadelphia.
Right.
Like half your salary. I couldn't even build lineups with it.
But that's the main reason. But Sims would show you that also.
Yeah.
But I think if you plugged in the actual ownership of Diggs and Shakir and Kincaid and Davis, like the ownership with the relative value of these lineups became much, much lower than what was expected. But I think from the Millie perspective, it's more of, high total, got to play it. I mean, that's a lot of what the large field contests are like. But on the running back side, I had Jonathan Taylor as the highest owned running back pre-lock. Like my running back ownership, I had Jonathan Taylor coming in as number 1, Derrick Henry number 2, Pacheco number 3, and then Rachaad White number 4. And I was looking to play a bunch of Ramondre Stevenson. He came in around what I thought he was going to be, somewhere in the 12% range. I thought James Conner would be higher owned than 4%. I had him at 10. But Jaylen Warren was someone I was considering I thought he was going to come in at 10% owned. Good thing for me that I just cut him off my list because I was playing more Ramondre lineups, that I just said, okay, I'm not going to play Jaylen Warren, even though I think he's under-owned at 10%. Jaylen Warren came in at 22% owned.
Yeah. And
Derrick Henry came in at 27% owned. I thought that's where Jonathan Taylor was going to be. It turns out that I ended up playing 6 out of 12 lineups with Jonathan Taylor and 2 out of 12 with Derrick Henry. And that was the proper way to do it, even though I predicted Jonathan Taylor. I thought Henry and Taylor would have their ownership swapped.
Yeah.
Taylor would be 27 and Henry would be 19. And I think this is the byproduct, James. We take a look. I think it's a byproduct of Pittman and Downs being more owned. I had Pittman at 20%, but I had Downs at 10%. And once you start jamming in Pittman and Downs, like most people aren't playing 3 guys from the same game without like Minshew in the lineup. So I think it just came down to people were happier to play the Colts receivers and not the running back when there are other running back options on the slate.
I don't know what happened with ownership this week. I was talking about it with Eric Haber on Twitter. Like this week, ownership projections were, so usually ownership projections are kind of like we measure R2 and we measure deviations a bit, but like if you want to be directionally accurate with ownership projections. And usually we are. Like usually RotoGrinders is, usually I am over at Pater, usually ETR is fine. Like usually we're directionally accurate, and then you're just kind of fighting over where the variance lies to be better. This week, but Jonathan Taylor was projected as the highest owner running back. I can't remember the last time the highest projection on ownership was the 5th highest owned player on the slate.
Right. Typically they're more. You have someone that you project for 26%, they come in at like 40.
Yeah.
You're like,
well,
okay,
because we've talked about this before. How I do ownership is I do it on kind of like a logarithmic scale. Like the highest owned player is going to be a little bit higher owned, and then players that are underneath what you call kind of like the Mendoza line for ownership, those guys drop out in ownership typically. And the guys in the middle are kind of where they are, right? Not this time. Derrick Henry, when we flipped the cards and I saw that Derrick Henry is 30% owned, I was like, well, I made mistakes today. Like I was fine. I said it in content. I was fine with Derrick Henry at 10 to 15% owned, but I never like playing him right now when he's chalk. And he comes in as the highest owned running back. In the contest.
Take a look. Take that on that regard. Not to interrupt you. I want to show in Results DB, which you could obviously use for free at RotoGrinders, rotogrinders.com/resultsdb. Here's the 555 milli. So this is a 5,000 entry contest, $555 entry fee. Look at the running back ownership here. Taylor, 35%, Pacheco, 27%, Henry, 22%, Rashad White, 21%, Ramondre Stevenson, 20%, Jalen Warren, 18%, Kyron Williams, 15%. You take a look at
way more sense.
And look at wide receiver. Tank Dell, 22%, not 32%. Justin Watson is higher than in the millie at 22 versus 13, right? We have Diggs still come. I mean, people still play Diggs here. People still played Evans, right? A lot more on Olave. Olave's ownership in the 555 is twice as much as in the millie, right? So you take a look at all of this. You take a look at tight end. Trey McBride, higher owned. And even at quarterback, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence, Gardner Minshew. CJ Stroud was 8% owned as a stack in the 555, yet he was the highest owned quarterback in the millie. 18% here. So there's a dramatic difference between the two contests, and the ownership that I was working off of, and obviously I manually change, mimicked more of what this looked like.
Yeah.
Right? But the thing is, I tend to play these size contests, right? So I'm not playing, like me, I'm focused on 1,000 to 5,000 entry field contests, not 177,000 field contests. So actually, when looking at my lineups through this lens of the 555, I look at my lineups and I go, okay, it's kind of what I wanted to do. And like, I didn't play much of Justin Watson. I played more of Josh Downs. And talk about a tilt with Josh Downs.
Yeah, I have
Justin Watson has one target, one catch, one touchdown, 7.3 points. If you told me that Josh Downs had got 13 targets in this game, he got less. Have you ever seen this? We were talking on the Gilcast. By the way, I was guested on the Gilcast. Go to the podcast feed for RotoGrinders Fantasy Football, or the Sports Grid Fantasy Football feed. I was on with Justin Herzig and Davis and Nate. I think Davis brought it up. This may be the first time I've ever seen a player have less fantasy points than targets. To have that, to have 13 targets and 9.3 points is one hell of a feat, right?
Well,
a lot of the stuff was uncatchable, though. I mean, yes, I get it.
Yeah, and he got tackled at 5, right? And then Minshew missed him in the red zone, or in the end zone. He missed him for a touchdown in the end zone. Yeah,
Josh Downs could have put up 30+ points on this slate.
Yeah, easily, very, very easily. Super tilting stuff. My biggest tilt of the week is actually Adam Thielen, who came in. I locked in.
You played Carolina Panthers on this slate?
I played Adam Thielen on this slate against Derrick Henry as a 2. Okay. Because if Derrick Henry is going to be doing well, he has some of the highest win-loss splits of any player. So if Tennessee is going to be leading, which I assume they would, Derrick Henry is going to be doing the work, which I assume that he would. That part worked out fine. Adam Thielen comes in at 5% owned, coming off another 11-target game, 1 catch for 2 yards.
Yeah, well, that's what happens. It's the Panthers. They just fired their coach.
He has had the best workload of any wide receiver in the league sans Tyreek Hill. And then in this game, where he's 5% owned, appropriately priced, Derrick Henry is giga chalk. He puts up 1 catch for 2 yards. That's my tilt of the week. That's so dumb. It's so dumb to have that happen when he's been so consistent. He gets so many targets. This week, I think he got 3 targets.
Joe Marino has a thesis about why the Bills were much higher owned than we expected. Casuals double count matchups. Everyone knows Philadelphia is a pass funnel in the highest game total, so they jammed the Bills. Same reason JT came in much lower owned, because people have the perception of Tampa Bay's run defense.
I want to say yes and no. to that. I do think that casuals double count this kind of stuff. I totally agree with that. And people will be on top of something and then they'll be confirmed into something, and priors, all that kind of stuff. But we don't typically see such drastic changes when it comes to things like running back. I'll give you Buffalo. I'll say Buffalo would make sense because highest game total, it's like the game. It's probably the best game on the slate, whatever. But the Jonathan Taylor thing, I mean, people have been playing running backs against Tampa Bay all year. Like it hasn't stopped them basically at all this year. So I'll push back on that a little bit.
Also, people look at the Panthers defense and go, well, people have run all over them. I mean, yeah, but that's the reason why. But we're talking about things that are already in the projections. It's not like, right. It's like the thing is, like Donnie Watson says, the JT ownership may have just been a product of I know better, right? I know ball because of the Tampa Bay run defense, even though the projection said to play Jonathan Taylor. Like Jonathan Taylor was the highest raw point projected running back on the slate.
Yeah.
Right. At his price. And then we find out that maybe if we knew the workload, maybe he shouldn't have been. But on a 2-game sample size, it seemed like JT was going to be like 80%. 80% of the work, and then they just go back to like, oh, at halftime, Jonathan Taylor has 4 carries, and a touchdown, and then it's like, okay, we get bailed out. Like basically, he got the most efficient 21 points that you'll see from a running back that I think only touched the ball 13 times or something.
Yeah, and that's. It's going to happen. It's just if a player is the highest owned player on the slate, he's going to do well in NFL this year. So you just have to expect that. You can always lock the highest owned player because they get there on efficiency. One question that was from DFIC: should we avoid players like Demario Douglas and GPPs? Projects well, but has a 1.5 ceiling. Should you look at ceiling someone evaluating lineups? I think that. Blender, you typically avoid guys like that, right? Demario Douglas.
What? Let's get back to macro concepts.
Yeah,
lineups, not players.
No. But this is more of a question about a specific player, though. And I know that you, especially in cash, you will avoid cheap wide receivers that don't have a great workload. So your opinion
Douglas has a great workload. He's fine.
So that's what he's asking. That's what he's asking.
No, I would prefer if given the choice at the same ownership. So if we make a constant and say here are players that are similarly owned, similarly correlated to your lineup, similarly everything, I would prefer to play Rashid Shaheed over Demarius. Like Shaheed was 4,300, Douglas was 4,400, I believe. I had a lot. I think I had Demario Douglas in one lineup, but I preferred to play Shaheed, even though their projection was similar. I guess it was close enough because Shaheed's much more likely to get bailed out on a long touchdown pass than Douglas is. That's given everything being equal. But there are lineups where Demario Douglas is still fine in your lineup. I mean, it's like I wouldn't have played like. I was playing a bunch. The reason why I didn't play much of Demarius Douglas in my 12 lineups is because I was playing way more of Ramondre Stevenson. And Stevenson plus Douglas is probably not a very good combination from a heuristic standpoint, based on their.
They're only scoring 1 touchdown each week, so that's
true. That's one thing, but their route participation is similar. Like typically, if I'm playing a running back plus wide receiver combination in my lineups, I'm playing the high A dot guy, not the low A dot guy, because the low A dot guy is basically getting the workload from the running back, right? So like if you're gonna play the slot receiver of a team, I don't want to play the running back that catches pat. Like Godwin plus Rachaad White is a combination I'm less likely to play than White plus Evans, right? Because the types of passes that Rachaad White gets are the passes that are at 6 yards from the line of scrimmage, which is what Godwin gets typically.
Right.
So Godwin needs more yards after the catch. Like now, obviously, this is just a heuristic. Depending on the lineup, you tell me Rashid Shaheed is 97% owned, and Demario Douglas is 3% owned. I'm playing Demario Douglas in every lineup and never playing Shaheed. Even though, well, Shaheed's profile is he could, yeah. I said if everything was equal, and in DFS you rarely get the situation where everything is equal, right?
I will give a more straightforward answer that does not require a lot of heuristics, because I think that it's good to have two sides of this. When you think about, so typically when I think about cheap wide receivers specifically, I try to think about what do they really have to do to kill me? Like if they're going to be popular specifically. So a cheap,
right, like Justin Watson. I looked at Justin Watson and said, do I have to play this guy? How does he kill? Like he got 7 points.
Right.
And we're tilted over 7 points that didn't mean anything. Like
right.
What is, even if Justin Watson caught another touchdown and scored 13 or 14 points,
he probably still
you could have still built lineups that didn't need him. So like do I care? Like Rich,
so that's kind of
a cheap guy that could catch have a line of 382. That's a guy I'm much more scared of than the guy that catches 3. Wan'Dale Robinson chalk, I'm never afraid of.
Right. Yeah. I did that same thing with Wan'Dale Robinson earlier in the year when he was chalk. It was like, what's the best case scenario for Wan'Dale Robinson? It's like 8 catches for 40 yards and no touchdowns. Right. Even if he catches a touchdown, like he probably still doesn't kill me at 4K. So I think that's really the better way to think about it when it comes to high owned cheap wide receivers. When it's low owned, you can get a lot more, kind of throw it to the wind. You find a high ADOT guy like Rashid Shaheed or something like that and just go for it if he's going to be low owned. If they're going to be high owned, that's when you need to start to think about kind of, can this player kill me one way or another? And a lot of the way of me saying this comes from having limited lineups. If you have like 3 to 5 lineups, that's how I like to think about things. If you have a full portfolio, it goes way more into what Blender said, where there are going to be lineups that make a lot of sense utilizing even high-owned cheap wide receivers, just because you can make it work, or the correlation works. Like I used Justin Watson with Patrick Mahomes, who's only 6% owned. Things like that make a lot more sense. You have to think about that more when you have a portfolio. When you have 1, 2, 3, 4 lineups or whatever, just think about what do they need to do to kill you? Can I really kill you with an expected workload? If not, you're probably fine not playing.
Right. If Demario Douglas was chalky, I'd be like, oh, okay. Like, how is he going to kill me that much? No.
Well, and he was projected to be relatively highly owned. He's projected for like 15% owned.
He didn't come in at 15 though.
I don't think so. No.
This is the regular, the 555.
Oh no, he did. Yeah, he came in. It's right there.
Yeah, he came in at 16% owned. Yeah.
Yeah. So with situations like that, man, I just think it's mostly, it's going to come down to a lot of how many lineups you're playing, what contests you're playing, all the regular stuff that Blender and I always talk about that people don't listen to. But it's going to come down to that stuff. And if you have only a couple lineups, I think it mostly just comes down to, can this guy kill me with an expected workload? With a Patriots wide receiver in any matchup, with a Giants wide receiver in any matchup, probably less likely to play them in limited lineups.
Right. Or just bad offenses in general.
Yeah.
Is the receiver attached to Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi likely to kill me? Right. Or like people took a shot on Jamar Chase, which I think is fine. Yeah. Fine. But I'd say at his price, I'm like, is a Jake Browning team? Is the Bengals with that low total I'm less likely to care that much about it. I mean, it's not like the Bengals were going to be owned, or like the Steelers. What was the two things before we get out of here was what was your projection for Pat Freiermuth at 2,900 yesterday?
Not much, man.
He came back and barely did. He came back from injury and a bye week and barely did anything. And then next thing you know, he's the number one. He's the top target for Kenny Pickett.
I had him checked for like 5.5 or something. Look, I basically made the stance. I want to see Kenny Pickett do it before I use any of these guys. Like Matt Canada getting fired was good. That's right. That guy sucked at play calling. But I still think that Kenny Pickett probably sucks at playing football. So I'm not going to take shots on any of these guys. I played Jaylen Warren because he's been able to produce in that offense even without Kenny Pickett doing well. So in that spot, okay, sure, fine. He was over-owned, to your point earlier. I thought Jaylen Warren was over-owned at 20% owned, but I'll take a shot there. I'm not touching freaking Pat Freiermuth.
You can touch any tight end at 2,900.
But I'm not on this slate. Like there were options on this slate. It's different if I'm like having to dumpster dive at tight end like we usually do. This week you didn't have to. You had Dalton Kincaid was 5,300. He was accessible. You had a whole bunch. You had Cade Otton at 3,200 who projected
you had Evan Engram. You had tight end to play.
You had options. Like what? I'm not going to play Pat freaking Freiermuth on this slate. I'm not doing that. I didn't even have a reason to play him as a correlative comeback in any way because I'm not playing Cincinnati.
Yeah, that game had a 32.5 total or something. I mean, like
I'm not playing freaking Pat Freiermuth in that game.
Right.
There's no way.
Anything else?
No, this is a weird week. I did really bad, but I think that it's just because I'm on the worst down streak that I've been on in like 3 years. So I think that I played well. It just didn't end up going well. I'm getting way more into NBA props because I'm tired of late swaps. So I'm now a prop guy. I'm now a prop thought leader over at PayDirt. I'm focusing on that.
You see the difference. You see how less variance and less stress.
I'm already done for the day. I already put in all my bets before the show. Like, I'll just react to news now. If LeBron gets ruled out, then my Torian Prince unders are dead. But then I'll just take some overs somewhere too. So it's
right. But you still got time. You got NHL. You got to get your NHL bets in.
I do. Yeah, I have to get some NHL.
Some college football stuff coming out the midweek or something. There's always stuff going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I care about. I just care about getting $600 to $800 down a day, take my 10% and just walk away. That's fine.
Right. Yep. Right. We also got NHL DFS.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and we'll be covering more of that tomorrow. Tim is going to be on tomorrow. We have a 10-game NHL slate that we'll cover tomorrow. NBA Grinders Live later today. Crunch time for the NBA slate. Got the pre-lock show for Bears Vikings. Monday Night Football. That'll also be on the channel. Always hit the notification bell, hit the thumbs up button. You'll always know when we go live here on the channel. SimLabs, check it out. For the time it's free for the time being, but soon it'll go behind only for premium members. So go to rotogrinders.com/SimLabs. Build your showdown lineups. I think they've come out with some FanDuel stuff now also. We're slowly going to roll out SimLabs for FanDuel, for other sports, for more slates. So it'll be, it's still in beta. So as we roll out stuff, we'll let you know about it. So try that out. James, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at PayDirt_DFS, and then you can find all of my tools over at PayDirtDFS.com. I've introduced a lot of really cool stuff into the game log tools. You can see a lot of like minute-oriented stuff, like minute rotations and stuff like that. That's a new ad, but you can always reach out to me if you have questions about that kind of stuff. You can find me on Twitter.
And could be Travis asks about your downswing. I guarantee it's not $100,000 downswing.
No, I'm probably down maybe 15 to 20 over the last couple months, which sucks.
That also comes off a couple of months where you're up twice.
Right, where I was up 60 or whatever. So I mean, it's the ebbs and flows. You have the highs and then you have the lows, but it never makes the downswings feel any better. It always sucks every single time.
Right. If you've never had a downswing where you're thinking, did I just get lucky with all my wins? And am I doing some? Was all of that just positive variance and I just suck and I just do everything wrong? Like, if you have not gotten to the point where you're considering that maybe you've never been good at this at all, that means you've never been on a down. That means that you're not playing seriously, right? Because you're always going to get to a point where you could have won 7-8 different GPPs over the past 3 years and have a positive return, and then you go on this extended downswing, $20,000-$30,000 or something, at least for me. Yeah. And you go, maybe all those 100K, 50K wins were just like just dumb luck. Yeah. Maybe I've just been playing bad the whole time. I don't know.
Maybe that was my entire lifetime equity, and now it's just downhill from here. I'm not quite to that point, but give me 2 weeks of continued losses. I'm sure I'll be there in 2 weeks.
Okay, so you can follow James on Twitter, _DFS, me on Twitter at BlenderHD. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. Give me those thummy thumbs. Hit the notification bell for all the content here. After Thanksgiving, we've still got NFL stuff, NBA stuff, NHL, college football, college basketball, soccer. We got Champions League soccer midweek. Feel free to come by, check out the projections. Get a RotoGrinders premium membership, rotogrinders.com/premium. Click on that link in the description. Get $10 off your first month. Join us in the Discord. I'm telling you to do everything here. Join us in the Discord, rotogrinders.com/Discord. I have a channel in there. I'm going to be doing a Zoom coaching call for channel members in my in the premium Discord tomorrow at 3:00 in the afternoon. So feel free to join the Discord, become a premium member, and come by as we chat about some DFS strategy stuff behind the scenes. And and I'll see you tomorrow because we got Tim on for NHL stuff, and I'm here. I'm here for you guys Monday through Friday, 11:00 Eastern, talking about all things you're thinking about in daily fantasy, props, and pick'em on RotoGrinders today.